present the Christian viewpoint on the affairs of the state. Now, with our first segment of Church and State, here is your host, Nathan Curtis.
Good morning. You are listening to Church and State, and we are broadcasting from our studios at Cornerstone University, located at 1605 Broad Street, Lake Charles. You can find us on the website at kelbradio.com, and I would encourage you to, if you get your computers out and turn them on and go to kelbradio.com so that you can both see as well as hear what's going on here in the studio. We have a gentleman here who has done, he's put, I would say it's probably not hundreds of hours of research, but thousands of hours of research into what he has brought us today. We won't be able to adequately present it, but occasionally we'll pick up a chart. These will be charts of the heavens and how they appeared at different times in history. And he's relating all of that to Bible history and also to Bible prophecy in the future. And also, if you'll go on YouTube and look up Planet 7X, YouTube 7X, you may be able to watch a video that he's produced. Here in the studio we also have Dr. Wayne McIntyre, who's been co-host of this program on Fridays for the last 4 years. And,
right at 4 years.
Pardon?
Right at 4 years.
Right at 4 years. Well, now let me get back to our guest who's traveled here from Abbeville this morning to be with us, Gil Broussard. Good morning, Brother Gil.
Morning, Nate.
I think you and I first talked several months, maybe 4 months ago, and met you through a fellow by the name of Terry. What's his last name?
Shannon.
Terry Shannon was here and mentioned you and thought very highly of you, and said we should get in touch with one another. Terry, you brought a stack of charts.
Yeah.
It has cost a small fortune to produce, I guess.
They're very impressive. In fact, I see on your card that you do photography, so this is something you're set up in your own space to produce?
Yeah, that's graphic software. That's Photoshop to create the examples.
Now, Brother Nathan's already mentioned that you have videos on YouTube. Can people see these charts on those videos?
Yes.
In fact, it's more than one video. You've got about 19 of them on YouTube.
Right.
And the key search is either Gil Broussard or Planet 7X.
Correct. And that will show all of the models and the examples pertaining to the astronomy and the biblical references.
Well, before we go into what you've discovered, won't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, where you were brought up, and how you came to Christ?
Okay. Well, my background is in design and engineering in the oil field, and my hobby, which was astronomy, is what brought me to these examples that I've brought you, and biblically, I've always thought God existed, but He's just more real today than He's ever been by the examples that He's shown me in the Bible and the way the science works out.
I know my professors at Louisiana College used to tell me all truth is God's truth, and you've discovered things through your study of astronomy that actually correspond to or confirm what we find in the Bible. Is that what you're telling us?
It actually does both. It confirms some of the events in the past, and then it's also lining up with a future event, which is in Revelation.
Now, some of our people may be confusing astronomy with astrology. Can you tell us what the difference is?
Yes. Astrology is against the Bible. You're not supposed to predict your day-to-day events from the stars, and astronomy uses daytime sky, like using the zodiac.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And the biblical way of doing things is using the nighttime sky. And in the Hebrew, it was called the Metzra, I believe it is. Let's see here. I believe it was called that.
Let me speak to our
Metzra.
Let's say our co-host over in Houston for just a moment. Brother Larry, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I hear real clear.
Are you on your phone?
I'm on my cell phone. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I was just informed by Ray that you would need to stay on your cell phone so that we can hear you. Well, we're going to let Brother Gil go ahead with his presentation here. Brother Wayne has taken a good look at some of the charts. You can't absorb all of this in a few minutes. It's going to take some time. But feel free to comment and to ask questions, Brother Larry.
Okay.
Let's start with a look at the past. What have you discovered? You said there's, I believe you're telling us that there are patterns in the stars, and the Bible does indicate that God has spoken through the seasons. Even back in the book of Genesis, he talks about, he gives us the heavenly bodies for signs and signals.
And seasons. Yes.
Seasons. So what patterns have you seen that would not only confirm the past, but maybe point to the future?
Okay,
Is that the right question to ask? Is that basically the premise of your studies, is that there are patterns?
It's patterns that are found outside the Bible as well as in that match each other. It goes all the way back to the ancient Chinese and Japanese and Korean astronomy records that they documented a NEO, we would call that in astronomy, a near-Earth object, in 1054. And
is this what you're calling Planet 7X?
Right, because there's enough data. We've had 3 references that we can calculate the size of this object, and it's roughly between 6.5 to 7.5 times the diameter of Earth. So I use the term 7. So, and it also helps us separate the data when people are talking about either Planet X or Planet 7X, to where it actually defines where the data is coming from, and this data is biblical as well as meets the astronomy records of the Asians.
Now, a definition of a planet is that it orbits around the sun. Is this something that's been identified as having the characteristics of a planet, or is that just a word you're using?
No, it doesn't meet the full definition of a comet. It doesn't meet the new definition of a planet. I think in either 206 they redefined what a planet was. That's when they kicked out Pluto.
Right.
And it says if it crosses any other orbit of another planet, one of the two is disqualified. Well, this object crosses Earth's path twice, so I don't know which one they would like to disqualify with that definition now. But it has the characteristics of an orbit of a comet, and it has a tail in the past.
But it's 7 times the size.
7 times the size of Earth, and it's a solid body because the data tends to indicate that that's what destroyed a planet where Ceres is, which is called the asteroid belt today. That is actually a destroyed planet, so it had a head-on collision with that one, and it went on to make other events. So obviously, this object is pretty large and dense.
And how often does it come near the Earth?
Well, according to the records, we're looking at a path. It's not exactly stable, but it's very close to 360 years apart.
And significant things happen on Earth when it makes a near path? Is that what we're saying?
Yep. According to the records, biblical as well as ancient documents, you run into these periods of 7-year droughts in the Bible, and where there's earthquakes, continents, the crust of continents are shifting by anywhere from 7 to 9 degree twist. I can go back in the history on the Temple Mount, where they have these cisterns that are carved out of the rock, and how they're off X amount of degrees during the time of their building. I can model it backwards and tell you at what period of time these shifts happen. And it's during the time of this, whenever this object I call Planet 7X or NEO passes in our solar system. And it doesn't always pass close to us. It really depends on where Earth is in its orbit. If it's in winter, at the time that it's making its round around the sun, then we just only get the weather effects and the earth and the earthquakes. But if it meets us around the time of Passover, like it has in the past, then there's meteorite showers associated, because we go through the debris field of its tail. And that's somewhat of some concern here for the future.
Do you think that any of the weather changes we're seeing, hear a lot of talk about climate change, is our climate being affected by this 7X?
Yes. The actual math pertaining to global warming does not add up. So it has to be another factor. Plus, all of the other planets are warming up as well. And last time I checked, there isn't any cars on Mars, so it can't be the cars or man's pollution. So there's an outside force that is affecting Earth. You have the magnetic poles of Earth moving at 12 times its normal rate towards the geographic north. And that's significant. It's not double, it's 12 times faster than its normal. And if you look at all of the charts pertaining to earthquakes, tornadoes, droughts, all the way down the line, they're all going way off the scale. Multiples are 8 to 10 times what is normally seen, as well as the sun flaring excessively.
Is that why we're seeing some of the strange weather that we're seeing today?
Exactly. This is all linked to one common denominator. If any of these objects, or if any of these circumstances or weather patterns or phenomenon was to happen on its own, or 2 or 3 of them, it's no reason for concern. But when you have a string of about 8 to 10 of these all going on at the same time with the same amount of scale, that it's 8 to 10 times larger, with outside forces like the moon having a wobble, the sun being flared, the planets all warming up. This is directly what we would expect from a gravity, a body, a planet entering our solar system, where
it would have to affect planet body.
Right. And this pattern is repeated through history. These same type of events, we've never looked at it along these lines before. So this is what's new. This is if you would ask me 3 years ago if Planet X was real, and is there any biblical substance to this, I would have straight out told you no, and that the Planet X violates planetary physics, according to what I've read on the internet.
How long have you been doing this research?
3 years.
3 years?
Yeah.
Well, you've compiled a lot of information in 3 years.
Well, yeah, the hours that I put into it, yes. It's.
What prompted you to get into this?
Well, once I found the Chinese, a scientific white paper that was reevaluating the supernova of 1054, and it proved that it was not a supernova, that it ended up being a NEO, a near-Earth object. Well, I looked at the data, and the Chinese and the Koreans and the Japanese did excellent work, where they documented the month, the day, the time, the direction of travel, the level of brightness, and if it was by any known stars or constellations.
What in the past have people said that they viewed when this planet came near? Does it look like the moon, just closer, or
well,
it is smaller because of distance? But
depending on how this is all associated with where Earth's position is in its orbit, depending on the reference of vision as far as size. Like in the 1700s or so on, it would have probably looked a little bit larger than what we would see in the sky of Jupiter and brighter than Venus, because Earth was in the winter section of its orbit. But let's take the case in the Bible for Joshua's long day. Well, Joshua's long day, the Talmud gives us additional information on Joshua's battle. It says that that him and his troops saw an object that was equivalent to 50 times the size of the moon, in reference to their visual perspective. Well, we can, according and as well as some of the other data, I can back calculate this as this object passed between the Earth and the Moon, roughly 70% to 50% of the distance, and this object was about 7 times the diameter of Earth. And when you run the model, you see that Earth passes through the magnetosphere, the tail of this object, because the tail is pointing 180 degrees opposite of the sun, so the tail is in front of it whenever it's leaving, and that's what caused the delay in Earth's rotation that's documented in the Bible. You see, according to the calculations, Earth's energy coming through its north and south pole was lessened by 4.5 to 5.5% compounded hourly, and what you get within a 24 to 28 hour period is the Earth stopping on its axis, and you have an extended day of 12 hours, exactly like the biblical model points out.
And a lot of people, not knowing what you know about astronomy, would say, well, that was just made up, wouldn't they?
Well, the strange thing is, what is the difference between science and hearsay? If we define science is if you can take a phenomenon that's documented, bring it into the laboratory, reproduce it in a model, and it shows that it's repeatable, that's science. Whether or not your information comes from the Chinese documents or clay tablets or biblical, it does not matter, because you cannot fake Kepler's laws of planetary motion. It's a elliptical path. It's not in a steady motion because it's speeding up as it gets closer to the sun. You can randomly throw a point in the sky and say that I saw something, but you cannot put multiple points and match the path, the trajectory, the speed, and of what Kepler's laws of planetary motion are dictating as far as the physics of the universe, and that is startling when it matches.
When did Kepler come along?
We'd have to look that up.
About 1500.
I think, yeah, possibly. I'm not quite sure that date. But an interesting thing about Kepler, though, Kepler killed Brahe. He murdered him for the data that he had. So I really don't like to use Kepler's name, because if you look it up, he stole the information. All of the Brahe documented the paths of many of the planets.
Mm-hmm.
And with that information, you had a pattern to where you could work the formula out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he stole that information after he killed him. He poisoned him twice. The first time he didn't.
Goodness.
Yeah,
that's something we've never heard in the.
It's actually documented now that. So I might use Kepler's name, but it's not with any disrespect associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the title should be pulled from him if he did that.
It ought to be renamed for the man that he stole the documents from.
Right.
That's what you're saying.
He was working towards developing the same formula that Kepler came up with, but he did all of the base work to be able to have this pattern to be able to calculate from.
I think we're getting a little bit past our break time. We want to take a break. We'll hear from Phyllis Schlafly, and we'll be right back with our special guest, Gil Broussard, who has spent many hours, hundreds, perhaps thousands of hours of researching the information he's sharing with us today. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back after Phyllis Schlafly. And good morning again, folks. We have a most unusual program. I would say this is something that you would ordinarily expect to find presented at a large university. And there are probably a lot of university professors that have never become aware of the information that Gil Broussard has and is bringing to us. You don't find researchers doing what you're doing in most of the great universities in the nation, do you?
Well, thank you, Nate. There is one particular one at UL. There's
That's UL. That's University of Louisiana at Lafayette.
Yes. There's two astronomers that have published papers saying that the orbits of comets are warped by a new gravity body.
Mm-hmm.
And this happens to be the same area of space as the data in the records that I found are pointing to.
Mm-hmm.
And there's about 3 different studies that you can look at that's pointing to the exact same area of space.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of these claims that the government has been making about climate change, things that Al Gore was saying, do you discount Al Gore's...
Completely.
Yeah.
He actually shows a lake in Russia that's dried up with the boats on their side.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was in Russia. That's one of the largest freshwater lakes that the Russians drained themselves because they wanted the fishermen to stop fishing, because they had ammunition plants along the lake that poisoned the lake and mercury and everything, and the fish was causing harm to the people. So that's why they drained the lake. It has nothing to do with global warming.
Mm-hmm.
And there was about 3 main issues in there that I caught straight off the bat that were outright lies.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever share any information or do any back and forth talks with people at the national, in our what do we call it? Our own government weather.
No one's ever contacted me on that level, but I have had astronomers contact me for the data, so they can run their models, and but they don't want to go public with the information. So,
most people don't realize that our Earth is traveling as rapidly as it is. It's in an elliptical orbit, as you've said. It's rotating on its axis 24 hours.
Yep.
It's completely that's 24,000 miles.
Well,
we all travel in a day as we travel with the Earth as it moves around.
Yeah. If you take Earth as a unit, the diameter of Earth, and Earth travels in 1 hour 8.4 Earth units within 1 hour.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons why we can calculate the size of it, is because it's the way that this planet crosses Earth's path in the month of Passover, or April or March, that angle tells us with the debris field that this object is roughly 7 diameters of Earth.
We also forget that we travel around the sun, not the other way around.
Right.
We say the sun rises and the sun sets. That's not the case. The Earth rotates around the sun, giving the appearance of sunrise and giving the appearance of sunset.
Yeah.
And it takes us an entire year, 365 days, to make that circuit around the sun.
Well, actually, that's only held true to Hezekiah. At all calendars globally in the secular world as well as biblical, the calendars changed around 702 BC. It was 360-day year prior to that, and Hezekiah and I think it was Isaiah that developed what's the Hebrew lunar calendar before. Before that time, a lunar calendar was not required. You had 30-day months. The feast fell exactly on the same day every year. And so.
And that's why the Indians used to say many moons ago. The moon was the changes in the phases of the moon was what people measured time by.
Well, Brother Nathan, I have a question.
All right, this is Brother Larry.
I'm having this is really quite interesting, and I'm just curious what Brother Gill's take is on the prophecy found in Joel, in the second, third chapter, depending on which version you look at, regarding the prophecy of the blood moon. Are you familiar with that?
No, you'd have to give me a little bit more information. I still have some ongoing work to do, but it's referring to the Bible. I have quite a few documented, but not that one yet.
Okay.
Those aren't the blood moons right there.
You mean the future blood?
Well, we've had one already in April of this year. We had that lunar eclipse that made the moon look red. It's going to happen again in October of this year, and then with Passover of next year and Tabernacles of 2015. I think that's what Brother Larry's talking about.
Okay. Yeah, it is written. I'll just read it to you real quick. I'll just pick out the particular verse. It says, "The sun will be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the coming of the great and terrible day of the Lord." And this has happened on 8 different occasions throughout our history. And as Brother Wayne said, it happened on 4/15 of this year. It'll happen again on 10/8 of this year. And then on Nisan 1 or Adar 29 on 3/20 of 2015. Again, 4/4/2015 and 9, I believe it's 28 of 2015. And it happens in 6-month intervals. The Latin, they're called tetrad, and it happened back in 1493. America was discovered 1492 or something like that. 1493 to 1494 at the expulsion of the Jews in Spain, and then in 1949 to 1950 with the establishment of the Jewish state Israel as we know it today. And then we saw another one in 1967-68, the Six-Day War, when Jerusalem was redeclared the capital of Israel. And then we're now in one in 2014 and 15. And a lot of the Messianic Jews or the Jewish state and many evangelical Christians believe that these definitely are signs of the end of time. And we look to the heavens. Even Christ says that you will see these signs, when they ask for signs.
Sure.
But we don't know the time these signs will be given. And the blood moon is a very important part of that prophecy. So I didn't know if you had studied that or would be willing to look into that.
Yes, I have dabbled into that, not extensively. But one thing I have what I found that the blood moons that you're talking about also relate to when the Jubilees are, or the Sabbath years, every 7th year Sabbath year. If you take a look at when Jerusalem was recaptured, and when the British general took it, and as well as when they were kicked out of Spain, it happened either just after a Sabbath year was done, and we have a Sabbath year coming up, which is this next March, and I am expecting some. I kind of expect CO3, 4, and 5 to happen within that time frame. Economic collapse, war in the Middle East, disease is plural in the Bible. You can see a lot of information today about, you see Ebola or swine flu, and it's said, the Bible tells us that it's spread by animals. So I think this next Sabbath year, one of the in the Hebrew, it's called a Mekra, which is a rehearsal. Actually, it doesn't mean feast; it means a rehearsal. Whether that's to represent something that's already happened or a future event, it can mean either. Like the sacrifice for Passover has already happened, so now it's just a rehearsal. We are supposed to stock up 1 year supply of food for a Sabbath year. You're not supposed to do any commercialization during that year, and you're supposed to stay home. I think the good Lord is going to put the whole world on notice here, on saying that you're going to misobserve the Sabbath year or else. I think we're looking at the time period possibly when the dollar will be collapsing. And
I think you're on target there. I think humanity in general has discounted Sabbath as a whole in their own arrogance and said, you know what, we got a better plan. And we got to forget that God is our creator. He has the blueprint.
Yes.
He knows the nomenclature of our makeup and that of the earth. And both us and the land is supposed to come to the peace and the rest of God. And like you said, God will have us do that one way or the other.
Yep. You see, the Bible even tells us, it warns us that in the future, which is the time of now, saying a good part of the body of believers will walk away from His laws. Mm-hmm. And that's being fulfilled because we don't observe the Sabbaths properly, or the feast days, if you want to call them, or the Mekras. And there's a penalty to be paid on that later. So...
You alluded to a change in the length of the year a while ago. I said 365 days. Did I understand you to say at one time it was 360 days?
Yes, prior to 702.
So it's taking longer for the Earth to go around the sun now.
Yes,
than it did.
When Planet X had passed close during the time of Hezekiah, remember when the shadow went backwards on the stairs?
In the sundial.
Well, in the King James it mentions that it's a sundial. But in the Hebrew it actually says steps. And when you do the math, it's actually steps that were facing south. If it had been a shadow moving east to west, that means the rotation would have had to quickly move back and forth, and you'd have mile-high waves. So the physics involved in that says no, it didn't happen as in that way with a sundial. But if it's a shadow on steps and it moved 9 steps or 10 steps, and that only 26 to 28 degrees. And this has been proven in an artifact called the Nibiru disc in Germany, which was the time of Joseph of Egypt. And it shows a constellation from Germany at that time period of Passover. For them to see the constellation of Orion at that latitude, you'd have to have a latitude of Luxor, Egypt, to see it. But yet they documented it. The only way they could have did that is if the Earth tilted. And I'm saying that's what took place. Well,
one thing that we know through history is that there have been a lot of fairly good astronomers in the past. Ancient man observe the heavens constantly.
Yes.
That we note that from the Aztecs and the Mayans and so forth.
But the Asian records, or the Chinese particularly, their records go all the way back to about maybe 300 years after the flood.
Mm-hmm.
And even some of their alphabet represents a family of 8 in a boat even at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the first emperor, the reason why he became emperor was because he was denoted as being the one who solved the way of draining the land.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting that he became emperor for that reason, that he drained the land. So it says that there was a problem there. And
okay.
I'm asking, are we doing both hours?
I'm going to suggest, can you stay for another hour?
All day.
I think we're going to need some more time to.
Well, I didn't know if you had a guess for the second hour. If so, we're going to get some of my questions in real quick, but
we can spread them out.
Okay.
All right. Well, you're going to be in town just about all day, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Brother Larry, did you have any other comments, questions at this time?
I would. Yeah. How would people get in touch with Brother Gill?
My email address is planet7x@gmail.com. And then once we make this initial contact, I can give you my phone number and other ways. And
okay.
What I'm hoping to happen is that the churches will invite me, and they put their best people together, like a group of 12 or so. And I'll review all of the data to where these people can run their own calculations, do their own study, and then inform the congregation what their findings are. I wanted to bring back part of the topic to you. Remember, you were saying about the blood moons earlier?
Yes, sir.
There's another interesting date that I found in the Bible that is alarming. If you read Revelation 12:1, it says the moon at the foot of Virgo with a crown of 12 stars above. I instantly recognize that as Leo above Virgo. Now, Leo is normally drawn with 11 stars. The 12th star would be the king planet, Jupiter. And the moon at the foot is an oddity as well, because the elliptical orbit of the moon is not at a flat plane. It's at an angle that moves around Earth every 9 years. So for that point to be right underneath Virgo's foot won't happen for another 9 years. And the date that it gives us in a software is March 26, 2016, using the nighttime skies, not the daytime skies. Because where it says that it's closed by the sun, the word sun right there is a misinterpretation. Ancient Hebrew would have had illuminated, meaning illuminated body. There's only 5 bodies in the sky that would be illuminated: the sun, the moon, stars, planets, and comets. We can start ruling out some of these using common sense. The sun, you can't see the stars when the sun is out. The moon is already stated at the foot of Virgo. Stars are not strong enough to cast light on other stars, so that only leaves you a comet or a planet. And this is an object that's both. It has a tail similar to a comet, but it's at the size of a planet. And the software model shows us that this tail, its illuminated tail, illuminates only Virgo, as the text is saying. If it would have been the sun, then all of the constellations are illuminated. But it's saying only Virgo specifically is illuminated. And that's what the software model is showing. So that's March 26, 2016.
Cool.
And it would be visible from the Earth?
Very much so. It's right next to the Earth. when it comes to that.
It'd be that 300-plus year rotation that
Yes.
you're talking about?
We're coming close to that. I give a biblical prediction of time, and then also give a scientific mention of time. Scientifically, it could go as long as beyond 2021. Or it could be as close, according to the biblical references, 2016 and 2017 seems like a more likely date of what the biblical records are pointing to. Specifically March 26, 2016. It happens to be right after the Shemitah, the Sabbath year. Again, lining up the way things happened in the past, something terrible usually happens after the Shemitah.
Mm-hmm. Are there any specific manifestations that we would see or notice on the earth itself when this takes place?
Exactly what we're seeing today. Scientifically, we're seeing earthquakes. I can show you charts that are they're elevated in the amount and the size and frequencies. Tornadoes also are way off the scale. Floods, droughts, all of these are 200 and 300 year records being broken. It happens to be the cycle of this thing. Every 360, 300 something years is when it passes around.
So in essence, similar things have happened before, but in 360-year cycles.
If you look in the Bible for 7-year droughts, remember Joseph of Egypt? 7 years of plenty and 7 years of drought. Well, about midway through the drought phase is when this object passed. You have 3.5 coming in and 3.5 of it leaving. You also see a 7-year drought during when King David was taking the throne. You had 3.5 years prior into Saul's reign, and 3.5 years of drought during David's reign. And it's there multiple times.
Well, one of the things you can get, I think, from what I'm hearing so far, is a correlation between the Scripture and events that can actually be tracked, that have been tracked and verified over the aeons of time.
That's what the definition of science is. It's taking a phenomenon, put it in a laboratory, and see if it's misrepeatable. That's the definition of science.
But you could also draw from that, if you haven't already drawn that conclusion, that whatever the Bible says, you can take it to the bank.
Yes. Very clear.
One of the things I think that you're affirming is that the majesty of who our God is, our Creator, and the God of our salvation is, but also, like Brother Nathan just said, too, that God's Word is true and is unchanging and is unshakable.
Yes.
We're out of time for this segment. I believe you're going to stay with us for the next segment. You'll be with us at 9 o'clock. Brother Larry, can you hang in through the next hour?
I'm actually going to have to break off here, but I sure appreciate it. It was great meeting you telephonically, and I will send you an email, and hopefully we can take it a little further. And God bless you all.
And you've seen us and watched us, heard us in Houston, right, Larry?
Actually, I'm down in Corpus Christi today.
Oh, in Corpus Christi. We're all over the place. Well, we go everywhere the Internet goes. Thank you for being there and
Thank you, Larry.
joining with us this morning.
They're having a week-long revival here, so I'm attending.
Stay tuned. Right. We'll be back at 9 o'clock. An engineer, I believe, working with oil field equipment, helping to design it.
Engineer tech, yes.
Engineer tech. And he translates engineers' ideas, I guess, into things they can use out in the field. But he's done a tremendous study of astronomy, not astrology, but astronomy. And he has a Planet 7X sequence of events. I'm looking at it here. I'll ask him to explain this. And he ties it to the names of people and events that we read about in the Bible. Your work can be seen on the Internet. Tell us how people can access
YouTube. On YouTube, just type in Planet 7X, or Gil Broussard, and it will bring you to the link where I have multiple videos showing the data and the models of science and biblical information.
So you feel like that the data shows unequivocally that there's been a pattern in history where this planet 7X came near Earth. How do you say it? Near Earth?
Near Earth object.
Yes. Okay.
It's actually on the planetary plane. That's the only way that it can actually cause damage as far as the meteorite showers. If you look at Revelation 6 and 7, at least through astronomy eyes, it's talking about fiery hail hitting the earth, or fiery mountain, and so on. And it's talking about two different events, roughly 5 months apart. And that's the same time period as Noah's flood, 150 days apart. In Noah's flood, it rained for 150 days. It flooded for 150 days.
Rained for 40 days instead of flooded for 150.
40 days. And at that 150 days, it says a great wind passed over the earth, which is, you could call it the pressure wave from a large meteorite hitting the earth the size of a mountain. And according to my calcs, that's the Gulf of Mexico. The Gulf of Mexico is the largest crater on earth right now. Whenever you put all the continents together like it was in Pangea, like one giant continent, and that's we had some other continental crust. 71% of Earth's continental crust is missing. Okay? That happens to be the exact volume of our moon. If you'd place the moon back on Earth where the two oceans are, or I mean all of the oceans, you'd end up with a flooded Earth again. But at the time when you look at the continents are squeezed together like Pangea, if you look at the direction, if it came in at about 22 degrees angle to the Gulf of Mexico, that angle bouncing off the core coming back up would show you exactly where the Himalayas are. The Himalayas are in an arc, a circular pattern to it. Though you see, the Himalayas were made in seconds, not millions of years, and that's why continent of India is still sinking, because the weight of it is pushing down on it, wanting to settle back into it. But that's where like the top 15 tallest mountains are on the Himalayas. A lot of people say, well, how much water would it take to cover Mount Everest? Well, Mount Everest wasn't there yet at the time. A lot of these ridges were made from the catastrophe. And when it pushed 71% of the continental crust off of Earth, the moon coalesced roughly 300 to 400 years later into what we see today. Funny, there is no documents back in time from the time of Noah's flood that show the moon. Today, the sun and the moon are the most drawn objects across the world, but it's conspicuously absent from the time of the flood.
The moon has something to do with the tides, right?
Yes.
So maybe before the flood there was not there weren't the seas to have the tides. It was just one large ocean.
We may have had tides because there's other influences that are taking place. There's two camps as far as what's powering the universe. People say that gravity is the main force in the universe. Well, the second camp says that it's electromagnetic nature, and electromagnetic power is like a multiple of 20-something times greater, than what gravity is, and I think it's an overruling force in our universe.
You've taken some of these projections and looked at a future. Do you want to tell us where you feel like we are on the end time prophecy as far as tribulation and the second coming of Christ?
I believe. There was the Jerusalem Post. The rabbis, which often don't agree on hardly anything, but they did agree on this: the multiple different sets of Judaism. That in March of 2001 was a Sabbath year, and that it was that was the beginning of Jacob's trouble. Well, that's interesting. That was announced in the Jerusalem Post in March of 2001. We had September 11th. That took place later, and I believe that that's the first two seals that have taken place. And one, the first seal says the leader is chosen to make war. I think that was Bin Laden. He was voted in by the mullahs to do this global jihad to move in Islam. Second seal, peace is taken from the earth within 1 hour. World War II took several years for the world to go into World War. This is the first time in modern time that in 1 hour the whole world was put on notice because of the terrorists on planes, and peace was taken from the earth. So you feel like something started in 2001? Yes, that was right after this. Exactly. I think that's where Jacob's trouble started, according to the rabbis and according to the data that we're looking at in the news today. They've basically made a war against Christians and Jews. And now I believe we're fixing to move into Seal 3, 4, and 5. Seal 3 is economic collapse. So your view of the tribulation is not 1 7-year period? No, it's 2 sets of 7. You start counting after the Shemitah, because every 7th year is another Shemitah. So you start from March of 2002 would start the first count, 1, 2, 3, 4 to 7, and then I feel that that's also related to other parts in the Bible, where like in Joseph of Egypt, 7 years of plenty versus 7 years of drought. We can start counting from that. It also lines up with I believe it was Jacob, where he worked 7 years for a bride and got the wrong bride and had to wait for another 7 years before he got the correct bride. I think this is all pointing to a 2016 event where he comes back for his bride, Miss Messiah. It's following like a lot of these stories in the Bible. Most of them are a shadow picture of us understanding what Revelation is coming. So I actually see Revelation as a time of 7, a time, and half a time. So the half a time is 3.5 years, and there's 2 times before that, which would be a total of 14 years. And so the 14 year ends on 2016, according to my timeline. And then another 3.5 years of the Great Tribulation. The Great Tribulation, right. I think we're fixing to go to what I would call like a mid-trib, escalating of what we've been through, of a more terrible time. But the Great Trib is described in the Bible more terrible than Noah's flood. Now, where does the near orbit of the planet 7X come into this? Well, if the date that's given in Revelation 12:1, with the moon at the foot of Virgo, with a crown of 12 stars where Jupiter's there, there's only one date that lines up with. That's March 26, 2016. That date is very significant. Now, I cannot tell you 100% that's the date that it's going on. I'm just saying pay attention to that date. It's written in the Bible. And if you look at Revelation 12:1, it's pertaining to, it seems like the beginning of the Great Tribulation. So we'll have to see. But before that time comes is a Shemitah, and we should prepare 1 year of food, of supplies, to where we are not we're not supposed to do any commercial activities during a Sabbath year of rest. So
how many people, are Jews aware of this, or do they have stockpiles of food? Who all observes the Sabbath year to be ready for this?
Israel has just officially announced that there will be, as a statewide, they're recognizing the Shemitah as a state thing for the first time this next year, and starting in March. So the majority of their farmers are going to not produce crops that year, and Israel is the breadbasket of Europe.
And what year will be a Sabbath year?
2015, March, starting with March.
2015.
So they are stocking up.
What do you do with the scripture that says no one knows the hour of the day?
That's pertaining to the actual rapture, which is a little bit further down the line. That's at the end of the 3.5 year tribulation. If you look at this in the way of a Hebrew wedding, like where he made a covenant with Abraham, later he did a contract at Mount Sinai, then he paid for the bride when he was on the cross. Then now he has to come pick up the bride, which is a Hebrew custom, mid of night, mid of week. But before he comes, Elijah has to come. What's interesting is Passover is fulfilled by Yeshua's sacrifice, but the feast of Passover has not been fulfilled, where Elijah sits at the table announcing the coming of the Messiah. So what's interesting with this date, March 26th, prior to that date, 3 days was the full moon. Full moon is the 15th, which is the feast of Passover, which is exactly mid of week. So it's following the Hebrew customs on when Elijah will come back to announce the groom is coming for his bride. And this may go against some people's teaching, but the bride is not, I don't believe, the entire church. The bride is a subset of the church.
Those who are watching and are waiting, some kind of differentiation of those who are prepared versus those who are not?
Pretty much. You see, the Mekra requires us to be in Jerusalem. That's one of the requirements of the rehearsal. Part of our tithing, just a part, is supposed to pay for our travel, our hotels, and our meals, and whatever is left gives over to charity. But that's where we're supposed to practice the Mekra, in Jerusalem. And if you look up where the two prophets show up, they show up not in New York City or not in Paris. They show up in Jerusalem.
And they seem to do things like Elijah and Moses. Of course, we're said that Elijah will come before the great and terrible day of the Lord. But we're not specifically told that Moses will come, and the name Moses isn't used in the book of Revelation.
Right.
He just does things that sound like Moses.
I'm thinking that it's going to be Moses because it would take Moses, they would have to hear it from Moses that Yeshua is the Messiah. They would believe him.
As far as Jews?
Yes.
The Jewish people?
Because some of them believe
how will they know it's Moses?
No.
He'll do some of the miracles that he did before, huh?
There are going to be miracles, yes. without miracles, they probably won't be prophets. So it's going to be quite an interesting time there. But they're only, the text says they only show up in Jerusalem. So this is not and people would say, well, how is the whole church going to get it? They're not. It says the remnant will. The word remnant is used. And
Brother Gill, I was doing a little bit of research on, you were talking about the Gulf of Mexico and the mountains over in India.
Yeah, the Himalayas.
It's mentioned in the Bible about Peleg, and it says in his days was the earth divided. That's mentioned in the book of Genesis 10:25, also in 1 Chronicles 1:19. It mentions it there as well.
Well, that's awesome, because I haven't documented that, but that's a literal statement then. If the crust was divided not just in continents, but part of it escaped from Earth's gravity, coalescing into a moon. Because there's 4 theories pertaining to the moon that scientists put out, and not a single one of them meets all of the planetary physics. There's kinks in the theory. This one fits. Now, some people say that, well, that blast would have generated enough heat where life would not exist on Earth. But I point out that the 2 levels of heat, one is from the blast, and one is the frequency that's emitted from a large blast, that all carbon molecules violently spontaneous.
We have someone on the line. Hold on, let's see. Who do we have, Ray?
You have Dr. Maselli on the line, sir.
Dr. Maselli?
Yes.
Yeah, turn his voice up a little bit, Ray.
There you go.
Okay, what I was asking Ray about was the gentleman that's being interviewed now. I had heard him say that he was an engineer, and when I looked at his website, I referred to him as an astronomer. So evidently he's got a day job or something, and he works as an engineer, and then the astronomer is a special interest that he has.
Well, let me correct that. Okay, I'm an engineer tech. He's a designer in all field equipment, and I am an amateur astronomer. And my research before I ever became an astronomer was my research dragged me into astronomy. Normally I wouldn't care about astronomy, but to finish the research from what the data showed me on the math on the Chinese records, it showed us that we had a problem, and now I had to confirm it with models with Mr. Astronomy software, and that's what led me into astronomy.
And you've only been into the astronomy about the last 3 years, right?
About 3 years.
Now, one more thing that you can clear up for me. The gentleman that was on the phone, did I hear that he was connected with the University of Louisiana, or is it you that's connected with UL?
No, that was Larry, and
Larry, okay.
I had just mentioned that there's other documents that point to a gravity body that's warping the orbits of comets. You don't have the orbits of comets changing. They're like a Swiss clock when they're not on the planetary plane, because there's no interference with the other planets. And so for them to be altered means you have a large body, not an asteroid. You have a large body that's affecting their orbit. And this is the same body that the Chinese and the Japanese saw, as well as this biblical item that they had saw. And I think it's in our solar system as we speak here.
You want to stay with us? Just hang on a while, brother. Maselli?
Okay, I will do that.
All right, you can. Going back, you have some charts. One there in your hand. And this is a Planet 7X sequence.
Yes, a sequence of events.
You have numbers at the top, and then down at the bottom you have names.
All of these charts that we're talking about here, people can download for free. If they go to that YouTube channel, underneath the videos, there's a link that brings you to a drop box for anybody to download these videos. And let me point out, like one of the most documented event was Yeshua's sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
It's documented not just in the Bible but in secular history that there was an eclipse that darkened the whole earth 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the moon, for a solar eclipse, you need the moon to be in between Earth and the sun.
Mm-hmm.
It can only darken the Earth for 3.5 minutes. 7.5 minutes maximum, and that's only a spot on Earth. That's not the entire Earth. For you to have a 3-hour darkness, you need an object roughly 7 diameters of the Earth at a given distance to give us the 3-hour darkness. This happened on Passover. That means the moon was on the wrong side of Earth. It takes a new moon to make a solar eclipse, not a full moon like what's required for Passover. So we're talking about that described event gives us enough data that describes a third object. And also in Joshua's long day in the Talmud, it talks about they saw an object 50 times larger than the moon. Again, if we use the diameter of 7 times the diameter of Earth, we're looking at an object that's roughly 50 to 70% of the distance between Earth and Moon, and that would give the visual effect of 50 to 1. So it's documented quite a few times here, but we just had to look for it.
You were telling me during the break why you're not exactly setting a day and an hour, which the Scripture says no one can do. You want to elaborate further on that? Because you do have a date for Christ to come around March the 26th, 2016. Is that a date for Christ to come, or simply for...
That is not the battle when he comes. He's only coming back for his bride. It says he places her in the wilderness. So that's not necessarily meet the term of a rapture where you're going to heaven. It says he puts you in the wilderness. It says twice in there. And that's a place of safety or shelter while the Great Tribulation. That group of people will not even have a hair harmed on their body because they're following the Mekrah that he put forth for us to follow. And the reason why we're still on earth, I think, is to witness the mightiness of the Almighty. We will feel the earth shake. We'll see the earth tilt. We'll see the stars move like we've never seen it before. And we will be experiencing His might in all of His might. We can't do that if we're off the earth. We can't be in awe of Him. So that's why I believe we're still on earth at that time. It says wilderness, and there's no place in the Bible that wilderness is referred to as the heavens.
Isn't there a place in Revelation where it talks about the woman? She was and she had bore a child, and the devil sought to just kill the child.
Correct.
But the Lord provided a place of security and
exactly.
safety for her.
Exactly.
Now, I'm wondering if the child was that the nation of Israel?
What's interesting is whoever believes in the Messiah and the Father becomes adopted in that form of Israel. That's being taught, or the what we would call the bride The body of.
Let me read this portion of Scripture. It's from Revelation 12. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. Does that figure into any of... It says, and the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days.
Which is exactly the tribulation period. So we're in. There's only a remnant that's following his guidelines of the rehearsal patterns to be able to meet the 2 prophets, to hold the feast of unleavened bread and such. Because that's how they knew Yeshua was the Messiah, because they were fulfilling Passover. They saw him as that. Where? In Jerusalem. And just like that verse says, the moon at the foot of Virgo, which is a very encryptive method, but part of that is actually astronomy. The moon at the foot of Virgo is what we see on March 26th. Crown of 12 stars. Leo is normally drawn with 11. The 12th star is Jupiter, the king planet. This is the same king planet that was there for his birth. Mm-hmm. Okay. In Leo, it was over Regus. When those 2 joined, that meant his birth, King of Kings. Well, this...
Are you saying that Jupiter is a star that the wise men followed?
It was the indicator. Yes, the wise men were taught by Daniel how to interpret and read. It's interesting that treasure that they brought to Joseph or to the Messiah. You can allude from the text that treasure was Daniel's. If he lived within the king's palace, that means both Daniel and his other 2 partners there were eunuchs. If you lived in the palace, that means they had no heirs. And Daniel reigned with 2 or 3 different kings, so he was quite wealthy. So he passed on his wealth to the astrologers astronomers, that he showed them how to read the stars to bring this treasure to the Messiah.
That would be the gold.
Right, because
gold, frankincense, and myrrh.
Joseph was broke at them. Remember, he only offered 2 doves instead of a lamb, because that's all that he could afford. So then here's the angel that's telling he has to go to Egypt. That's a major cost, because you'd have to buy passage on a camel caravan to pay for their protection to go and such. And here's the 3 wise men showing up with Daniel's treasures. So the timing there is right to the T, right up to an hour is when they were delivered. And going back to Wayne's question, he was saying no man knows the day or the hour. What I'm trying to point out is we're talking about 2 different events, one before the Great Tribulation and one after. There's part that was missed in the text where Yeshua comes back for a short while to move his bride to a place of safety, which is the Mekrah, the way a Hebrew groom does. And that day we will know, because Elijah is going to be there announcing it on the Feast of Passover. Then the next day, which is 3.5 years later, we can count on a calendar today where that date is, but that's not going to be the same date when it comes to that time period, because as you read in Revelation, a fiery mountain hits the earth, and the earth wobbles so violently it's like a hut in the wind. And if we go back to, what's that prophet's name?
Enoch.
Enoch says in a future time frame that the year is 364 days, which I believe that's the time frame that we're looking at. We'll have 364 days in a year after that major hit. So we won't really know when that day of the resurrection and the rapture will actually happen. We can put it on a calendar today and say it's on this day, but we won't know when it comes to that time, because our hours and our days will be slightly altered because of the immense hit that the earth takes. Because the Bible even says the earth is split. That means one of the oceans dies and the earth is split. I mean, that's an incredible hit. Mm-hmm. If the earth is going to wobble like a trunk or like a hut in the wind as it's misdescribed. So
the Enoch that you just mentioned, is that the Enoch referred to who walked with God?
Yes.
And he was not, for God took him?
He had walked with Elohim. The term Elohim is plural. And what you actually, Adam had, what's interesting, you can only find this information I'm going to give you in the Torah, in the Hebrew script. It's not in our English because there's no word for olive and tav, so it's missing from our Bible. When you go back and look at where the olive and tav is and what it's referencing, it actually states that the olive and tav was made human, male and female, it says. Well, the male and female is X and Y chromosomes for a man. How did they know that? It's only in the text of the Hebrew that says that. Then if you go back, Adam had already died, because it says that Adam was the olive and the tav. That was Yeshua there when he was Adam. Well, people say, well, what do you mean? Adam sinned. Yep, he did. He took on the sin. But you read in, I think, I forgot what verse it is. It says that he was not deceived of the sin. Eve was deceived. Adam was not. So he did it as an act of love, because if Eve would have went out in the wilderness alone, she would have died. He gave his life willingly to be with her, to save her, as he did to us on the cross. It's a love story again. So he had already died, which it says the penalty for breaking is death. Well, he died. He was resurrected. He walked with Enoch at that time. Elohim. Elohim means in Hebrew, it doesn't mean God.
Do you read and understand the Hebrew?
Parts of it. The main words I look for. I'm still trying to learn Hebrew, but I've gotten under. I look up the main words to where that defines the passage. And Elohim means mighty one, or what we would call an authority figure. God the Father is an authority figure. The Son is an authority figure. It even says in the Bible, angels and a judge, a human judge, is a Elohim. Well, last time I checked, judge may want to be God, but he's not God. So there's only one God, which is the Father. And there's only one Son, which is in charge of everything. But it says, I forgot another verse, it says where the Father created him as a spirit being. So that's where getting back to the Hebrew brings us back to proper focus. When you look up the meanings of these, when you do a word study, you find out that it's a rabbinical practice to replace the Father's name with Elohim, and that's how we got God out of that. But that's not what the word actually means, because they're forbidden to say it. But that's a man-made law. He says, I hold this against you for not teaching my name. We are supposed to say his name in teaching it. And it's I actually say with a vowel in it.
What is the name of God, the proper name to use?
Yahovah with a vowel. Without a vowel, it's Yahweh. And then there's certain other twists to it that a person could use. Mm-hmm. But right now, I think it's somewhat lost, the exact thing. But that's the way I'm saying it today, is with the vowel.
I may have been confused, but were you saying Adam was a type of Christ, or was Christ himself?
It was him. If you look it up in the Hebrew, it shows the olive and tav. I can pull this up on the computer to show you this.
But if Adam was Christ and Christ sinned, then he died for his own sin. He didn't. He couldn't be the substitute for our sins. That's very clear in the New Testament.
Okay. The reason why Christ came back is it says we're not held to the letter of the law. We're held to the intent. Therefore, He gives us grace. Okay. Same thing happened to him with Eve. He took on the sin. It says in the Bible that he was not deceived. Adam was not deceived.
Right. He willfully sinned.
He willfully sinned because he wanted to save her. Just like he took on the sin of us at the cross. Okay? And sacrificed. He sacrificed his life for Eve. It's a love story. And what was the penalty? It's death. Just like it was on the cross. Death. And he's the only one that has power over the tomb or the grave. But we can only read that in the Hebrew, because the olive and tav is not present in the English translations.
Well, do Jewish people teach that Adam was Messiah?
Before Yeshua on the cross, they said that the olive and tav was the Messiah. Because of the one particular rabbi, I forgot what his name is what formed the type of Judaism they have today. And they no longer recognize the olive and tav as being what it is. And but the olive and tav, as Yeshua said, I am that mystery. I am the olive and the tav. We heard it say in English, Alpha and
Omega.
Right. But the New Testament was not created yet when
that's Greek.
It was only the Hebrew Torah, and he defined it. That mystery, that was him. Matter of fact, if you go look around Noah's flood, how is it that Noah built such an advanced boat when there wasn't any boats at the time, or ships? There was a ship, not a boat. And how is it that he built it all the way up to almost the limits of what wood could stand in the engineering form? Anything larger than that would have broken apart. If you look at it, the olive and tav was present. And if you read the text in English, it says God sealed Noah in, or Elohim. It's actually Elohim. Sealed Noah into the ark. That was the olive and tav again.
He closed the door.
He closed it. He was the one that sealed the door for him.
Yeah.
He is also in the text, we can pick up when you read the olive and tav, that Noah helped building it, but the olive and tav, the carpenter, if it rings a bell, is the one who built the ark.
Mm-hmm. Brother Jerry, are you still with us?
I sure am, and I have a question or a term that might create more questions, but when we study the Old Testament, we study about the types of Christ. And
right.
So just as Joseph and David were types of Christ, then Adam could have might have fit that term. What do you think?
Yeah, well, that's a type, but I wouldn't, unless the olive and tav is there, that's the only thing that would confirm that he was actually there. Because Yeshua is saying that's him. If you look at the first chapter in Genesis, Elohim is plural. And one thing they don't write down, even in the Hebrew text, is the singular version of Elohim as Elohai. They don't teach that because they don't want you to know that there's a singular version to that. The God of Abraham, Isaac is Elohai, he said. It's translated with the English on Elohim, but when you read the Hebrew above, it's Elohai. And one of the three guests in front of, in front of Abraham was Yeshua. And he only sent 2 of the angels to destroy Solomon and Gomorrah.
Well, I really appreciate you digging into us a perspective.
Yeah, I have a Hebrew Torah that's in the documents. Whenever people want to download, it's a mechanical translation, the most literal meaning of the Hebrew word. When it says Elohim, look at the Hebrew to make sure that it's saying Elohim, because sometimes it's Elohai, but they will not translate that into Elohai. They always put Elohim.
Are you saying that can be downloaded from your website?
Yes.
Okay.
Along with the videos and the charts.
Well, we're just about out of time. We've got the 2-minute warning, and we're just about out of time. Do you have a final word for us, Brother Gill?
No, everything's fine. If there's anyone out there that wants a presentation or a get-together on the data, just contact me, and I'll be more than glad to do that.
By the way, I looked up that reference that you had. Adam was not deceived. That's from 2 Timothy. 1 Timothy, the 2nd chapter. And it's part of a discourse that starts a little earlier. But the 14th verse says, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived was in the transgression. But I assume from that Adam willingly, perhaps because of his love for his wife Eve,
yep, exactly
decided to
it's a love story.
Do what she did. Okay, well, we're out of time, and we thank you for listening, and we want to thank our special guest, Gil Broussard, for being with us for this 2-hour program this morning.
Well, thank you, Nate. It's a pleasure.
And we will hope to get back with you sometime, perhaps have you back again.
Sure, anytime.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening, and we're out of time.